Welcome to Julie Grieve, who's the founder of CEO of Criton, a guest engagement platform for the hospitality sector. Criton allows independent hotel service departments and groups to create a guest app into which all of their guest-facing technology can be integrated, including booking, check-in, mobile access, and mobile ordering. Julie set up and was the CEO of Lateral City, a luxury service department operator in Scotland, where she had the idea for Criton, having been frustrated at how static her guest information had become and how disconnected she found the hospitality tech world. Julie's vision for Criton is to give independent operators access to big chain technology. Julie is also a Director of Women in Tourism and Ambassador for Women's Enterprise Scotland, and she sits on the People and Culture Advisory Board for the HSMAI. Julie, hello, and thank you very much for being with us today.
It was lovely to be with you as ever.
Thank you. And tell us, what is the HSMAI? Let's start with that.
The Hotel Sales and Marketing Association. I sit on the European People and Culture Board, so we are trying to make hospitality the a profession of choice. It's about our part of it is about helping young people see hospitality as a great career choice.
And so it should be.
Well, so it should be. Of course. I mean, you know, were it not for hospitality, I wouldn't be running Criton.
Quite right. Talking of which then, 2020 has brought unprecedented challenges to the industry, as we know. Operators have had to change procedures and adapt to new customer needs and have had to be as flexible as they possibly can to get through these last few months. What are the main changes that you've witnessed in the sector? And what have the service department operators that you work with been able to do to adapt to this period of pandemic?
Well, I mean, oh gosh, I could go on at length about this, but I think the first thing to say is just how amazing the sector has been in the face of this adversity, you know, because I think we all in January and February were kind of looking at it and presuming it was just going to be like previous SARS and stay in the Middle East, and of course it didn't. And I think, you know, for example, your campaign around about stay with confidence is a great example of how agile the industry's actually been, and the wider hospitality industry, because I work with hotels as well as service departments, you know, coming together, really lobbying government around about the impact it's had on us. So that's been great to see. I mean, from Criton's perspective, we've seen a real uptick in engagement with our product as a means of communicating with the guests. So previously, not everybody, but some people would have said that our tool really was a digital guest book, for example. You know, service departments would put videos into it of how to work appliances and that sort of thing. But all of a sudden, overnight, everybody was sitting in their board meetings going, right, we're going to remove every bit of paper and we're going to try and reduce touch points. So how do we do that? What can we do? And so we saw, you know, a real uptick in people phoning me up and saying, I spoke to you 2 years ago. Turns out you were right, which was very nice. But also just kind of thinking about what they wanted that guest journey to be, I think. So embracing that. And then, of course, a huge change in cleaning protocols, making sure your staff are safe as well as your guest. You know, what sort of guest have you got and how do you provide the sort of information that maybe a more leisure traveller looks for versus your sort of you know, corporate traveller who comes every month and knows your building and your surroundings inside out. So it's been fascinating to see just how the industry has moved quickly to really adopt changes that can make a difference to their guests.
And Criton works with many leading luxury hospitality businesses in the UK, both hoteliers and service department operators as well. What are the variances you've seen between them in terms of technology adoption, generally speaking? I know we always talk about technology and the need for technology as we move forward within our sector, but what have you seen from an adoption perspective?
So I think the big thing in our sector really is, of course, it's not always easy for service department operators to adopt digital key. So the hoteliers are the majority of them are looking at it, and you know, indeed the big chains have mandated that digital key will be available in all of their properties by the end of this year. So there's definitely a lot of talk about that. And in the service department sector, that's not always so easy, and so they're looking for ways to minimise check-in time, get information to customers and be able to communicate with them in a way, you know, generally using their phone. And I would say hoteliers focus a lot on how the tool can not just communicate but be used to upsell. Whereas when I speak to my service department operators, it's seen much more as a communication tool, providing that sort of digital concierge service comfort. You know, if you're in an apartment and maybe the reception's closed at 10 o'clock, for example, that they can still get in touch with someone. So I'd say that's where it diverges. Of course, we do have some operators who are service departments, but also provide food and beverage, for example, and then that's very similar to hotel. How can we make sure that we are upselling that? How can we make sure our customers know what's available and when? And then keeping, I mean, everybody's keeping the information up to date. You know, that's exactly the same. I can't tell you the change in how often our apps are updated now compared to last year, for example. Everybody's really looking at making sure they're on the button with information.
And I suppose we've always said that technology has never been more important as operators look to streamline their services. You talked a little bit about the variances between hotels and service departments, predominantly upselling, but providing contactless services and increased bookings directly online. How have operators been using technology, and what particular issues have you seen then?
So I think the biggest thing with any technology, and certainly with Criton, is that it needs to be adopted throughout the business. So it can't be forced on the team at the front desk, and it can't be dragged up to the board. You know, everybody's got to accept that there are some standard operating practices that need to change to make sure that customers understand what the technology gives them and that team members understand what the technology gives them. So from my perspective, what the teams are looking at is how does that replace what I used to do? So, you know, I might have to give them lots of bits of paper, I might have to telephone them, I might have to go and meet them. How can the app in our circumstance replace any of that? How can it streamline it? How can it make it more efficiently? And the guest is saying, well, what does this give me that I don't have to do? So I don't have to stand in reception for a while. I maybe don't have to come to reception at all. I don't have to be given lots of paper that I don't know if somebody's touched. There might not be a book in the room, but it's fine because actually I've got everything on my phone and all of the recommendations are there. So I think those are the main uses of technology, and definitely pre-check-in, so that capturing as much information as you can before the guest arrives, meaning that any time spent checking in because you don't have digital key is as short as possible.
And if we were to ask you the hardest question in the world looking ahead, what does the sector look like? What's going to happen in our industry, and how is technology going to play a crucial role in that? Or is it, in fact?
Yes. Well, look, I mean, I've talked about this before COVID arrived. There's a guest expectation now to be able to use their phone to interact with their accommodation provider. That, you know, everybody expects to be able to use their phone wherever they are. So as an industry, we were already seeing that coming towards us and thinking about it. You know, if you as a guest make a request on a phone, that request is tracked, it goes into a system, it's ticketed, it's easy to report on, it's easy to understand how long it took to deliver, the cost of delivery, all of that. So the data that we get out of that engagement is not only good for the guest, but also good for the operator. So I think it will play a part. I think in the short term, it will play to the service departments operators in terms of that leisure traveller. Leisure travellers are traditionally a bit more needy than your traditional corporate. And if you are looking at pivoting a bit towards that to make the most of a bad situation, more domestic travel, less corporate travellers for the next period, then that information hub, that digital concierge, that comfort that although they're not able to go to reception 24/7 doesn't mean they're not in touch with you, I think will play very well to the sector. In the longer term, it's coming. You know, it is a given that for now our mobile phones go everywhere with us, and that's not just guests, that's team members as well, and that we want more data. We want to understand every single part of our operations to see how we can really drive efficiency into them. And there's no doubt that every piece of technology in the sector, whether it's housekeeping, guest engagement, check-in, PMS, all of that is now being looked at as how it can really ensure that we keep our costs to a minimum.
And what recommendations would you give to service department operators about adopting and using mobile technology? Because I think you said, hoteliers are seeing it as an opportunity to upsell. So it's a commercial driver in many respects, whereas the service department industry at the moment, generally speaking, and I recognise that some of our service department operators do provide concierge and food and beverage facilities. But what would you say in terms of recommending and adopting a mobile technology strategy for our service department industry?
Well, I think the first thing is to be really clear about what you want your guest journey, including digital, to be, because once you understand that and you understand how your technology will play a part in it, it's easier to build. But from my perspective, I say service departments have a huge opportunity to ensure that they engage with the guest, take the guest back off the online travel agent, for example, if that's where the guest has come from the first time, and get them to book direct, because you can send them push notifications directly to their mobile with offers that don't hit with parity to really drive that return booking. And that's what's going to happen if you are going to be dealing with domestic travellers for the next period of time. You want them to come back to you, and therefore you want to engage with them and get your brand on their phone. So I would say there's a big opportunity to save commission costs and really drive brand loyalty, or guests feeling that they're loyal to your apartments, and then use it as a communication tool, as a way to drive efficiency, as I say, but also just as a way to really understand what your guests are doing. Because not only do you get say, for example, a guest message, you can check that data, you understand what they're looking at in the app, how often, what the time is, where they've come from, all that sort of data, which really helps you understand your guest. And if you understand your guest, then marketing becomes easier, because that segmentation piece is really important when it comes to marketing.
Fascinating. Thank you very much, Julie. It's really interesting talking to you. We really appreciate your time, and let's hope that we're going to get through the next few months quicker than we have done so far. I really appreciate everything you've done. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, James. Thanks.